everyone, my name is Audrey Wright, and today on an excerpt a day, I will be exploring the third movement from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. How lucky are we as violinists to have this beautiful music in our excerpt repertoire and to be able to play it in auditions? I just think it's fantastic. I love it. Now, I often talk about finding specific areas of focus within the excerpts that we're working on to help give us a sense of what the purpose of this music is or what we're trying to portray in each excerpt. In the case of Beethoven 9 here, I think the number one thing to keep in mind is that you want to portray a sense of beautiful lyricism, right? This whole symphony is about the voice. It's about song, it's about singing. And we really want to bring that out in our playing with this excerpt. So I'm talking about incredibly smooth string crossings, beautiful connections between the notes, beautiful warm sound, and of course, really long phrasing. So let's get into it from the beginning of the excerpt, shall we? So the first thing to figure out is how are you going to start this excerpt and how to get your tempo right from the beginning. Now, I like to think about what's happening before we start this excerpt and then also what happens during in the rest of the orchestra. So we're coming from, a section where it's heavily focusing on the winds and a little bit the brass, especially the French horns. And what helps me find a tempo is the triplet figures that are passed back and forth within the strings before getting to this lo stesso tempo. Those triplet figures actually continue throughout the excerpt that we play in the first violins and the rest of the strings. So it's a nice kind of rhythmic bass line to really get a good sense of tempo from. And then also to note, during the excerpt, of course, we want to know that the original theme, the main melody, is being played by the winds. So it's always nice to have that running in your head as you play these notes so that everything is in context. So I'm thinking just a really beautiful triplet pulse, 1 and 2 and then we kind of want to bloom out of that. The sound needs to kind of just open up and be really beautiful and warm. It's piano, but it needs to be warm above anything else. So not too small of a sound, certainly not too big either, but something that has this sense of bloom. Maybe let's see if I can make that those grace notes a little bit smoother. So if you're listening carefully, I'm bringing out those grace notes, making sure that they get attention just as much as that upper D. Sometimes I think it's easy to kind of gloss over those opening grace notes, but they're a part of that vocal quality, and we should bring them out as well. So a really beautiful vibrato to start. And throughout the entire excerpt, I keep my left hand flexible so that it can vibrato in specific places, but I'm not going for vibrato on every single note because I think that would be distracting. I think it would actually take away from the longer sense of line, and it would be just a little bit too much. But of course, my hand is nice and flexible so that certain notes I can bring out and nothing sounds dead in any way, for sure. So, maybe a little bit on this C sharp here. Something that just highlights that beautiful kind of chromaticism and helps with the sense of phrase as well. Now, string crossings are pretty tricky throughout this entire excerpt, and in the second bar here is where we have the first instance of that. That's kind of a large leap, and if you're doing the fingering that I'm doing, which I would suggest doing, you have a shift in there as well that we want to make as clean as possible. So I'm really just slowing down the bow to the tip and trying to make that turnaround as smooth as possible. And what helps me do that technically is I make sure to lift my elbow in anticipation of that string crossing, my right elbow. If you see, I'm already kind of lifting it up so that my bow is on the right level that it should be at to move on to that D string on the up bow. So it kind of gives me the best chance of a smooth bow change and kind of not having a lot of sound in between that shift. Now going on from here, we want to bring out this hairpin, but we don't want to force the sound. So I suggest opening up the sound by using a little bit more bow at the top of the crescendo and then just using less bow to make a decrescendo. This is really a study in excellent bow distribution, right? So using more bow at the top of that first crescendo. So I kind of stay right at the tip towards the end of that decrescendo because I'm using less bow, right? So not using a lot of bow at the beginning of this bow. Nice and slow to start. And then so it gives me enough room to make this next crescendo. the top of this F natural, just very gentle, kind of just falling down very naturally. But we want to make sure that it's not just about dynamics, it's about the phrase and how this would be sung by a singer, right? Now, going on from here, I start this next crescendo up in second position. Here's another place where bow distribution is important. So we want to start with a nice slow bow. And then I kind of leave maybe the upper third of my bow for the diminuendo down. So I'm using kind of 2/3 of the bow for the crescendo up and about 1/3 coming on the diminuendo down. Now this next phrase should be, you should start it with a very special vibrato. Now we don't want to take too much time into this measure. This is the downbeat of measure 104. Because of course the melody is going on in the winds and we don't want to obstruct that in any way. But there has to be a color change here. So something in the left hand really has to bring that color change out. This kind of is such a pastoral feeling here. I just get this image of we're out in nature and we're flowing, but we have no agenda, right? We're kind of enjoying the sights as we pass them by, and I think this phrase in particular really brings kind of this image of nature to mind for me. So really feeling that those little hairpins at the end of each 6-note figure, they're not overdone. They're kind of just, I'm using a little bit more bow, kind of a little bit more bow speed on them, and a little bit of vibrato to bring them out. But really, they're like little gentle gusts of wind, or maybe if you think of something like water, like a babbling brook, something where there's a little bit of movement, but nothing too abrupt. So it's all very gentle. Now in this next bar, this is bar 106, I'm not using a whole lot of bow here. I just stay where I've gotten to in my bow. Right, I'm just kind of hovering around the middle of the bow because we're not really going anywhere phrasing wise in this measure. We're kind of playing with the shapes of the notes as they rise and fall, but we don't want to make any kind of big crescendo or attempt at going anywhere in terms of a long phrase. So just stay right here. While bringing out, of course, these little ebbs and flows. And then at the end of the bar, we can really almost make a tiny little decrescendo so that we have space to start this more dynamic crescendo at 107. So maybe it's not so much a decrescendo as it is we really just want to do something with the sound that demonstrates that we're starting something new or we're building something up. And again, with this crescendo in bar 107, I'm using bow speed and lengthening the bow to make that crescendo. Certainly no pressure whatsoever. And then we can really feel a sense of release in the second half of that bar. Just beautiful and warm. Now, going on from here, I've experimented with lots of different fingerings, but the one I think that works best for me is staying right in first position. So for these triplet figures, so just beautifully smooth string crossings, just like you're drawing some kind of beautiful arc on a piece of paper. No worries about trying to bring individual notes out. It's just one movement. And the kind of activity happens in the next bar, in 109, where we have these little dotted figures. So again, little kind of gusts of wind here with the bow, just light and maybe a little bit more bow speed, but we're not using too much bow. So that it all stays in this same kind of character. Now, coming out of this, I stay up on the A string for that chromatic scale up. Now, it's easy to want to make this crescendo before it's actually written in bar 110. But I encourage you to really hold off on making that crescendo until it's actually written. I really just maintain a very light and kind of even bow stroke getting into that. What bow am I on? Right, so I'm moving the bow, it's light, it's airy, but it's not really making a crescendo until the next bar. Because I really want to save that crescendo and make it something exciting. It's kind of getting to the climax musically of this excerpt. So I really want to make that crescendo in 2 beats. And then making that beautiful decrescendo down. And then this is just a little playful. Not too, trying to make it as smooth as possible, but I'm not using too much bow there. We don't have to make a big deal out of it. Now, in this next bar, I like to give enough sound, a little bit of a core sound, right? I almost think of, kind of a bass baritone singing this part. Something that is a little bit more grounded in the sound to start with. And here we really start to open up for the first time in this entire excerpt, it's the longest crescendo, so we can really start to open up here. This is pretty tricky getting into bar 112. So to create this, to make this string crossing, you're literally jumping to over the D string to get to the open G. You really have to have a sense of relaxing your upper body right at that string crossing. Otherwise, sound, extra sound is gonna come out. So I release. And I'm not picking the bow up because you don't want space. There still has to be this connection. So that's why I say I actually kind of breathe out while I'm making that string crossing. And now we have to kind of continue that sense of remaining open and really nice and relaxed in the right arm because of these triplet kind of bariolage notes here. So really, really light in the wrist, really flexible. And I'm really trying to do it with the wrist more than any other part of the arm. And you might have a different fingering than me, but I do make this shift here, which is kind of a tricky shift because I'm going from first finger in first position to first finger in third position. And I have to make it as clean as possible. So I'm just relaxing as much as possible. That'll help. Rhythmically, I give myself a little bit of extra room here. I don't kind of barge right into the downbeat of 113, just so that I can make it sound beautiful and as clean as possible. So just slow down the bow. And then kind of sink in. And then I just stay right in the middle of the bow for this piano. And then we can end that phrase really gracefully and beautifully. Just this last measure that we have here. It's almost as if he's written out kind of a trill figure here. So no need to stress about the rhythm in any way. Just keep it flowing. Right? And instead, he could have written, if notation allowed, he could have written it differently so that it just sped up to be a trill. But, using the confines of the notation that he had, Beethoven wrote this, and so it just should be as seamless as possible getting from the triplet into the 30-second notes. And to do that, we just keep it flowing. No need to slow down, speed up in any way. Just keep it flowing in the same tempo that you've been in the entire time. So just remember with this excerpt that it's all about the long line, the big picture. Try to come up with an image in your head of what this piece brings to mind for you. And try to have that running as you play through it. I think it really helps with a sense of style and just, the musical purpose of this piece. Enjoy practicing it and happy practicing in general, and I will see you for the next edition of An Excerpt a Day.